This is the reason why you should buy. And we're not asking the most important question, the reason why it was important for them, in their heart of hearts. Like, that's a sale. Then we're going to see results, the mindset, going into every opportunity, saying to yourself, I would love to have the business, but I don't need the business. When they talk about building their organization just through referral, that means they're missing it. We're selling the experience. We're selling the reason why it's important to your prospect.
The internet almost shut down because they're like, are you blind? Do you not know what's going on out there? Do you not see what's happening?
You just did 250,000 cold calls. Congratulations.
That was fun.
I love it. Hi, Chris. How are you, sir?
Good morning. Good Monday, Crispin. We are ready to sell.
Yes. And I love Mondays. I love Mondays. 5 full days to sell.
I love it.
That's right. I hate Fridays. Everybody's like, oh, thank God, thank God it's Friday. I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you talking? This is the last day, and then I got to wait until Monday to sell again. No,
and it feels like on Fridays, no one's really selling, right? Especially with, if it's rainy on a Friday. If it's rainy on a Friday, boy, that's just right. Clearing the pathway for you.
That's right. That's exactly right. Hey, Chris, great to see you. Thank you.
To see you as well.
For joining the Pipe podcast, and really excited to have you on today. And of course, I'm Crispin Cruz with Sales Arbiter, and we're going to be talking. About today how podcasting can drive sales for your organization. So excited about that, and to hear it from the king, Chris Stone. So I'm really excited about that. So we'll see.
I'll get fitted for my crown this week.
That's right.
It's the first time I've been called the king. So
you better get used to it.
I will receive that. Thank you.
You better get used to it. So just a little background, we are for the Pipe podcast. So Pipe, what's it stand for? Process, initiatives, prospecting, and experiences, all wrapped around sales. So really excited about that, because we want to talk obviously sales today, and we're going to go through some questions, Chris, and hopefully I'm not going to task you too much on these, but would really, interested to see how we can drive sales with medium, the medium like podcasting, and then what other things you can do with that. And if you wouldn't mind, let's just start out and maybe just a little information about Casting Ahead. When did you start? How did it happen? Tell me all about your journey.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you so much for having me on this, I guess, the Pipe 2.0, right? That's what we're calling this.
That's right.
My name is Chris Stone. I'm at Cast Ahead. You can find me at chrisstone.contact and see all of my stuff. But I started out, Chris, in the music business 28 years ago, when digital music was just a gleam in Ahmet Ertegun's eye. And I started selling CDs and cassettes to a thing called record stores. And I believe there's maybe record stores that are still out there somewhere. But I learned sales that way, that a lot, and back then, when music was physical in a particular product, then it became digital. I was writing purchase orders, and I was like, hey, can we sell 30,000 Alan Jackson cassettes to a One Stop, and doing that kind of thing. And I learned early on, right fresh out of college, what sales really was. And that was really just sort of developing relationships with buyers and being able to accomplish what you needed to accomplish, because these buyers knew what I was there for. They knew what I was selling. The difference between what I was selling and what somebody else was selling was me. And
Right.
So that's really how I applied myself. And then it was a little bit easier for me to transition and pivot into digital music when Napster came in and the music business started, moving around, and there was all kinds of crazy things going on in digital. And I always had an affinity for computers and digital technology and all of that. And so I pivoted into the digital space. Started first and foremost in the mobile business for ringtones. So if you remember what a ringtone was, you pay $2.49 for a 30-second snippet that played on your phone.
I love
And
it.
then, of course, smartphones came in, and iTunes and Apple saved the music business pretty much and trained everyone how to download things and to stream things. And I transitioned into the streaming business and became the person who's basically the conduit for Sony Music and companies like Spotify.
Mm.
And, with the music business going the way it was, there was not a lot of places where people could be. I was the only person employed by Sony in Atlanta.
Wow.
And so, of course, they wanted me in Nashville or LA or New York, primarily New York, where a lot of the business was, where Spotify was, and where these companies were based. And I decided I wanted to be a husband and a father more than I wanted to be whatever I was going to be, Burgermeister of Sony or whatever. So
Right.
I built this business called Cast Ahead, which was based on podcasting and helping other people look and sound their best.
That's
And that's really what I was doing in the music business. These artists, they want to be creatives. They want to do what they do best, which is create music, create art, create what they wanted to do. They didn't care about how digital distribution works, how a file goes from here to here, and how something gets displayed on Spotify. They just want it there. They just want their music out and marketed and sold. And that's what I had been doing for years. So I just applied that to the podcasting space. And I'm working with creatives like Crispin Cruz to develop their shows and have them look and sound their best.
Well, that's a full-time job with me. So I don't know if you're
Look at you already.
I don't know if we're going to be able to take on any other clients, because to make me sound and and look my best, that's going to take some work.
You're going to be the king in no time.
Oh, thank you for that. So listen, yeah, you couple things that resonated with me. When you talk about sales, you said, I figured out early that I had to get out there, and no matter the product, no matter what I was doing, no matter what I was out there, trying to see if there was a compelling reason for my prospect to buy from me. They were buying from me. I was selling myself. And I
That's
just
right.
thought, that is sometimes that gets lost in translation. We focus so much on the product and the specifics of that product. And we need to know it back and forth. My father, even back in the day when he was in sales, he would say, "Oh, son, you need to know your product. You need to know." Now, I'm not discounting that, right? But here's what I would say. I would say it's just as important to know your prospect, right? You need to know your prospect as well as you know your product. And that's really important, because I'll tell you why. The more you know about your prospect, the more you engage with them at a high level, right? Then the more that you're going to be able to connect with them. And if they like you and they trust you, they like you and you're like them, then the likelihood of them trusting you goes way up. And then if they trust you, they're going to buy from you, right? And so that's all in the mix, right?
Yes.
And if you go out with the idea and the concept of, yes, I'm going to go out and really get to know my prospect, and instead of making it sound like a sales event, like you're trying to sell to somebody, have a conversation.
Right.
Just
Make
try
a
and have
friend.
Make a friend. Make it sound like you haven't talked to this person. You picked up the phone and it's a person you haven't talked to in years. How are you? How have you been?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the family. What's been happening, right? Make it a conversation, because
Yes.
ultimately they're buying you, right? Ultimately they're buying you.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
love how you started peeling that apart, and you said, a lot of people feel like it's important to know as much as you can about the product. And it is true, you should be knowledgeable of that. But if you think about being in the brain of your buyer, of your prospect, and you say, and you think, well, do they really want to know this about the product? And if you know enough about the product and you know enough about the prospect, you can say to them, hey, you don't need to know about this, this, and this. What you need to know, because based on the conversations that we've had, based on the knowledge that I have about you, is this. So if you can, and so that's really what I learned when I was sitting in the buyer's office of the person who's going to buy the most, in this case, Alan Jackson cassettes.
Mhm.
He didn't care about how many platinum albums Alan Jackson had. He didn't care about this. He wanted to hear it, and he wanted to be invited to the gold record party that was happening 2 weeks later. That's what I knew he needed.
Right.
Everything else, he doesn't care about.
Right.
He needed to know, what am I invited to this party? Just tell me how much I need to order.
Yep. Yep. That's so good. So great. So tell me a little bit about what's your ultimate goal with this, with your company, Chris?
Mhm.
What are you looking, what's your, what's your mission? Tell me a little bit more about that. Like,
Mhm.
where would you like this to go? I'm just curious with that.
Well, I learned early on when, because I was remote for based here in Atlanta, and I had people reporting to me that were in New York and LA and Nashville. I learned early on, I mean, in 2007, I started working remotely, and we were doing meetings with Skype. And then in 2011, Zoom launched, and I was one of the first in on doing that. And I realized people don't have their virtual presentation together. And when I say virtual presentation, I mean audio and video, and audio first and foremost, because people will put up with a thumbprint on your lens and maybe a blurry, kind of maybe choppy every once in a while video. But man, if you got some bad audio, they are not going to stick around. And so I had I don't know, 20-year head start on virtual presentation. And I realized that some of the greatest content has terrible audio and terrible video. And it's really hindering people from listening and learning and being educated and entertained. And so I was like, I can help these people. I
Yeah.
can help these people, and not only just help them, but help other people that they're helping. And so being an entrepreneur and starting this business, I get to choose the people that I work with. I get to choose people like Crispin Cruz and Dan Jordan and Victor Antonio and Sam Silverstein and Jeff Janakovo and all, because I know they have something that is important to say, and I can help them say that, and I can help them bring their message to that, because this stuff that we're doing, Chris, it outlives us.
Mhm.
Today we're doing this show, and it's going to live on the internet forever.
Mm.
Well, as long as Mark Zuckerberg allows it, I guess, or Elon Musk, or whoever's pulling the strings.
Right.
But I'm going to be 6 feet underground,
Yeah.
and depending on what you believe, I could be, in another world, or come back as a squirrel, whatever. But the content that I do is going to outlive me, so I treat it with very, it's an integral part of it's a legacy, really. And so what we're doing right now might touch someone in 7 years and 10 years and 20 years.
Yeah.
So that's why I treat it with so much importance, because I believe that it's really part of your legacy. So I don't mean to get too deep on this, but that's really what I want to do. Is I want to say, hey, I can have a voice and I can do things. But what if I surround myself with great people who have those things too, and be able to amplify it as well?
I mean, the passion. I mean, that's what I love. Okay. So that's what I look for. Like we're aligned in that way when Sales Arbiter looks for, potential
Mm,
clients, right? We want our clients, and we want to be passionate about them,
mm,
right? Because I love what you say, legacy. Like I think of that all the time, right? I mean, my parents, my mom was a migrant worker. My father was born and raised in the ghetto. My mom has an eighth grade education. Probably
okay.
one of the best operational people I've ever met in my life. My father was able to get his college degree, because my grandfather worked so hard in the restaurant business,
Mm,
just to have him be the first Hispanic, in our family, to actually go to college. And then, and my father and mother were from that ilk of, the reason we work so hard is to make life better for you and your sister, right?
Mm.
And, but I never forget, like, one of the lessons that my father taught me at a very young age was he said, I want you to be able to have a better life than we had. And I want you to be able to shower before you go to work, not after you get home,
Wow.
right?
Wow. I love that.
Right. And he was very passionate. Both of my parents are very hard, and still, even they're still alive, but they've always been very hard workers. And we're in the restaurant business for 40 plus years, right? Which is not an easy business,
No.
right? But they were passionate about it. Like, and that's what we look for. We look for, we look for client or prospects or clients that are passionate about their business, like you
Mm.
are, and that want to leave a legacy or an imprint, long after they're gone. And that's exciting to me because I see that fire in you. Like when I start to ask you about, like, where do you want to go with this and what happens? And since I invented the internet, I'll keep our stuff on there for as long
So you're in control of this stuff. Okay.
for as long as we possibly can. Right?
I love that story, man. And I love how you like that phrase. I want you to work at a job that you have to take a shower to go and not a shower when you return. That says so much. It really does.
And I don't, and Chris, I don't forget that I'm literally one generation away from that. Because
Mm.
when my mom was a migrant worker with her family of 9 people, I mean, my grandmother, they would arrive at a farm and they wouldn't have anywhere to sleep, right? So my
Mm.
grandmother would clean out the chicken coops and lay down fresh hay for like all of the siblings to be able to sleep, in this area. I
Mm.
mean, it was that way, and I don't forget, I'm one generation, like literally one generation away from that, right?
Wow.
And so this is what's exciting. And getting back to sales and your business and talking more about like what you do for people, and for their organizations, I have to tell you, that sounds like it's the most exciting thing that you do for most. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, like a little bit more about what Cast Ahead
Mhm.
can is going to, what you're going to do for Sales Arbiter, for example, or for
Right.
others like us? Tell
Yeah.
us more about that function and that process, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I think, and this sort of speaks to the value and kind of like the topic of today's show, really. And people understand that podcasting is an important part of what you do for really any business, and it can be as niche as you really want it to be. But why? Like, it's the first thing that I discuss with people, that approach me, whether it's a referral prospect or whatever, is, well, tell me what it is that you want to accomplish with your show, with your podcast. And it could be anything from, hey, I want to make money, right? That's a reason why. It's an absolutely valid reason why. But podcasting is a long game in terms of making that something that's going to be profitable for you, right? So if you want to use it as a way to market yourself, that's really what I can do for you. So the first thing that it really does for you is it helps you get found. And you talked about know, like, and trust, right? And so if they don't know who you are, how are they going to know if they're going to like you or not, right? And so the one thing that I do know is that Google loves the podcasts.
Mhm.
So if you have a show, if you've got a podcast, and if you're in the pest control business and you've got a pest control podcast, you probably are one of very few people that has a pest control podcast. That's a differentiator for you. It also helps you get found. And if you have great SEO, search engine optimization, you're going to get found. And once they find you, they're going to see and hear you, because your podcast is going to help you get found. And that, again, is a differentiator. Now, they may not like your voice. You know, you can't do anything about it. You can't change your voice. I can't change my voice. Plenty of people don't like my voice, or they may not like the way you look, or they just don't get the right vibe or energy from you. That's okay. That's that in a way, that's a sale. You've been disqualified. You know, you're not wasting each other's time, right? But if you're found, like in the case of the pipe, in the case of Sales Arbiter, you've got a greater chance of getting found by more people, quantitatively found by more people. And when you're quantitatively found by more people, you have an opportunity to be liked by more people, and then hopefully trusted by more people, and hopefully you'll be, making more money or achieve what you want to achieve. We talked about legacy. So that's really what I want to drill down to with my customers, with my clients, with the people that I work with, the people on my team, is what do we want to accomplish? Is it sell more books? Is it get you more, book you more speaking gigs? Is it doing that? Well, let's get you found first, and let's make sure that the content is something that gets you exposed to more people. So I really work on the visual, the audio, the creating the show, and all of the other stuff in the background, whether it's, search engine optimization, the marketing, the show notes, the graphics, all of that stuff is a part of that first initial 10 seconds that you get when someone hits play and starts watching and listening to you. That's really where I can do it the best, and what I'm in control of. The show that we're on here today,
Right.
You're driving the show. You're the one that's got the content. I can't give you everything to say, right? But what I can do is I can create all this pretty stuff that you're seeing on the screen. And those listening, we have this really cool pipe logo from Sales Arbiter, this lightning bolt, which was really fun, and some clouds and stuff that we have behind. This is what we do to create a show. And I'm talking about it, and someone is listening to an audio podcast, and now I just marketed your video.
Got it.
This is sort of a Venn diagram model. I used to think, Chris, that, don't say anything visual, because we're going to repurpose this to an audio podcast. And if someone hears that something is visual, they tune out. What is happening instead is we're 22 minutes in on the show. We already have you. You're already interested in this content. You're already listening to what I have to say. You're already listening to what Crispin has to say. You're interested in this. So if I happen to talk about something that's on the screen, guess what you're going to do? You're going to look this up on YouTube, which is the second biggest search engine in the world. Again, it's about getting found.
Yeah.
And then when you're getting found, you're watching. And once you're in, these are all the points of getting found and getting money and accomplishing what you want to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. And what you said, earlier, I'm going to back up the tape a little bit.
Please.
And for those that don't know what a tape is, or a tape cassette, they could go back and look, maybe they Google that. So it's really interesting when you said disqualify, and you said qualify or disqualify when you were talking about, whether when you're engaged with a potential prospect, and when you're talking with them about, the services that you provide and things of that nature. It's so important. And I think when you're doing this correctly, and when I say this, I mean, when you're doing this thing called sales correctly, right? Then at that, what you're doing really is you're trying to make a determination. Am I qualifying or disqualifying this prospect? And I go into most of my sales events, in full transparency, I go into most of my sales events trying to desperately disqualify my prospect from doing business with me. Wow. I mean, I know that sounds completely counterintuitive to probably some of the people that are watching or listening, but I'll tell you, this is one of those things that when I go in, I want to try to understand, is there truly a fit between our two organizations, right? Does it make sense for us to continue this conversation? And does it make sense for them? Are they what I call, are they really a pipe? Are they in the pipeline, for example, or is this just a pipe dream opportunity? Right? Are they a buyer, or are they a liar? Like, are they kicking tires and they're just, they're just on the lot? or do they truly have a compelling reason to buy today or in the very near future? That's what I'm
Wow.
trying to figure out, right? And so when we go into these types of engagements, and I'm starting to learn about someone, I'm bonding and rapport with them, I'm trying to understand, is there a fit? I'm asking good questions, I'm being a good active listener, like all of those things. Now I'm trying to figure out, okay, am I qualifying or disqualifying? And in most cases, I'm trying to disqualify. Now, if they make it through, that process, then my belief system is they're going to potentially, not always, but
Mhm.
potentially they're going to be a very good client, right?
Yeah.
So, as you were talking about that, resonates so loudly with me, that when you're going through and you're really trying to qualify or disqualify, I would ask, our listeners and watchers to think about that as well. So
Now, do you, just following up a little bit on that, do you have not necessarily a script, but are there, your qualify, disqualify sort of, not questions, but what's that process look like for you? Is it just a vibe? Is it just sort of like, or, like I know for me, like the first thing I do, I'll know in 5 minutes whether or not I'm going to work with someone.
mhm,
And it usually it starts with that purpose, starts with, tell me why, you're doing this. Or if someone already has a podcast, and I ask them to tell me about it, and they
mm,
really don't have it. They start telling me that they have a really good camera and a really good mic and all of those things that don't matter until the content's what matters. And so I know in about 5 minutes if this
yeah.
is really something that's going to be in the pipeline or a pipe dream, like you say. So for you, what does that look like?
Yeah, so great question. So normally, when I go into any event, first it's trying to understand, okay, what type of individual am I engaging with?
Mm,
And so what we do is, and we also train to this, we talk about DISC, DISC, and we try to really understand, okay, what's the type of individual that I'm engaging with? Are they a D, an I, an S, a C, or do they have those behavior, drivers or that behavior type? And then I try to match and mirror that, right? Because if
mm,
you can't figure out, you haven't figured this out, I'm a raging I, right? I love being at the center of attention. The party doesn't start until I get there. That's kind of the person that I am, right? And so I have to literally cage that I. Like if I'm engaged with a D or an S or a C, and I've figured out, kind of followed the breadcrumbs to figure out that's the behavior type that I'm like engaging with, then I have to cage that I, and I have to turn up my D or turn up my S or turn up my C so I can match and mirror them more closely.
mm.
Because like we said earlier, people buy from those that they like, that they trust, that are like them,
Right.
right? Right. And so I try to be more like them, right? And so even on this podcast, this is probably the most you'll ever hear me talk, you know, because I'm always asking questions and I'm trying to understand, and I
Hmm.
slow down my talk track and my cadence, like all of those things, that I'm doing to try to really understand what is the compelling reason. Why am I here today?
Mm.
You know, you brought us in for a reason, or you invited us in for a reason. Help me understand, why am I here today? And so it's really asking engaging questions to understand what we call pain. What's their pain? What are their pain points? What's driving them to try to make a decision or change what's currently happening in their business to hopefully have some more of a positive or an incredible outcome. What does that look like? Does that
I
make sense, Chris?
Absolutely. I love how you went to what you could control, right? So when you're approaching someone, or someone's approaching you or whatever, you're say, okay, how can I apply myself to these principles? How can I do that? How can I mirror myself so that way I can disqualify this person? And
Mm,
so that to me is what I see lacking in a lot of people is, and I'm not saying everyone is self-centered or whatever, but if you're in it for yourself, and you're in it to make money, usually that doesn't work out well, and that gets uncovered. That onion gets peeled back. And in what I do is, if you're only, and I work with a lot of influencers, and we do Amazon Live, and there's a lot of that. And if you are someone that is there just to make money, what happens is you try to game the system. You try to, and I see, I'm sales podcasts, there's a lot of people that go to scripts, right? Well, if you want this to happen, you have to go through this script. And if you want this to happen, you want to make more money, you want to do this. And of course, that grabs people's attention, that grabs their eyeballs, that grabs their clicks. Here is, 4 scripts that you can use for this particular objection. It's like, well, I mean, that's great. That may be a good sort of starting point. You need that framework, you need that template. But every person can be different, and there's nuances that are happening in those conversations. And I think what you're talking about is saying, hey, I'm not just going to deliver you all of this stuff that I learned about how to deal with this particular person. You're saying, how can I do something myself in order to achieve maybe a friend, or maybe disqualify this person as a prospect? And that feels like it's lacking a lot. But that's good business for you, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you're right. It is. I mean, it's interesting because, you don't want, like, no one wants to have a bad, a bad client. Like, no one wants that.
Right.
Like if I'm not serving if I'm not serving my client the right way, once they become a client, then I want to be able to part as friends. Like I want to say, hey, we gave it the old college try. I'm sorry it didn't work out,
Right.
and I don't ever, ever, ever want to burn a bridge. Like, that's just not, because when I come in, it's one of 3 reasons, right? One, they're having issues with their challenges with their existing sales team, and they're just not, they're just not performing at the level as expected, right? And so, and this is kind of bleeding into number 2, which is process. They may or they may not have the functional things that they need, the foundational pieces that they need. So leadership can actually can peer into that window of sales and be able to see how, their team is performing, right? And so functionally, they don't have the CRM in place, or they don't have the right reporting, or they don't have the KBIs. We call them KBIs, not KPIs, key behavioral indicators, right?
Love it.
And there's a philosophy behind that as well, right? Because if you behave correctly in your role, right, then you're going to have an increased level of production. And if you have an increased level of production, then you're going to have more sales. Like people try to make sales like so complicated.
Right.
It's not that complicated, right? Behave correctly and you'll have an increased level of production, and your increased level of production will yield more sales. Like, it's that easy.
Yeah.
Right.
Victor Antonio uses the ABC model, which is it's attitude drives your behavior, which drives the consequences.
There we go. I mean, almost, I love it. I love it. And so as we're talking about, like, when I'm talking with potential prospects, or with clients, hopefully they're prospects that convert to clients, then, at that point, that is number 2. Number 2 is normally somewhere, is located somewhere around process, right? And do they have all of those functional pieces in place to be able to view, or be able to understand how each and every one of those that have sales responsibilities within the organization are performing, and what tweaks can we make, to get them to perform at a higher level, right? And then the third is where I've gone into businesses, and the best salesperson is the owner. Right? The best salesperson is, and they love telling me this. Yeah, we built our business on referral, and they're proud of that. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be proud of it, but if you're hanging your hat on simply building your business on referral only, then I got to tell you, you're doing it the wrong way. There has to be some organic, outreach and sales happening in your business at any moment in time, right? You have to be, and what I'm talking about, organic, which means going out and finding new clients, or finding new prospects that maybe you would have never found before. Like you would have never been out going out and, networking. That dirty little word, cold calling, I mean, going out and really prospecting for new business.
Mm.
Right. And so those, those are those companies I love because they got to the point to where they're at, and the owner knows how to bond and rapport. They know how to sell. They know that, getting referrals is important, but they also know that if they're going to be able to expand their business and make something happen, and they want to get to that next level, whatever that looks like, then they're going to need a sales initiative, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we do,
I love it. I love it. And what you're saying applies so much to podcasting. You said cold calling, and people look at it as a different pipe, different outreach. But when you record something and you're out on YouTube and LinkedIn and Twitch and Facebook and Twitter and all of the tubes, your outreach, you are putting yourself out there with content. You're out there showing people and displaying and you're giving content away. But if you're worried about that, maybe you need to make better content. So, but you are doing that as an outreach. And so not only are you, like I said, getting found more, but you mentioned this word, networking.
Mhm.
And it is one of the most undervalued and underrated component of podcasting is the ability to network with people that you want to have on your show or for you to be on their show. Because without, me on this show, the king of podcasting,
That's right.
you proclaimed it. So that's not self-proclaimed.
You're right.
But this is this is a show that's just you talking, right? And so you want to have guests, you want to there'll be solo episodes probably, or whatever from a particular podcast, but after a while you want some change ups, right? You want some. And so the ability to say, you know what, I wonder if I could have this person on my podcast. You'd be shocked to see and hear how many people would just jump at the chance, even if you have a brand new podcast. And then you're in a conversation for 20 minutes with a very important person. And I've had clients, and their entire reason why they wanted to have a podcast was because they wanted to go and get the business of their guests. And I thought that was brilliant. So they have this show and they're like, you know what, I'm going to have this person on my show because I want to do business with them. It's a fantastic idea.
It's awesome.
And that doesn't mean you're going to get business from everyone, but you can disqualify someone on a podcast as well and have a conversation with them. It's an ability to network. You create good content, and you sort of check a number of boxes when you do it. It's a completely underrated component of podcasting.
Right. That's right. That's great. It's so interesting on the different ways that you can use, your podcast, your live stream, and repurpose it in all the other digital media as well. Like that's one thing that I'm excited about is being able to take, for example, snippets of what we're doing today and posting that out to LinkedIn, to YouTube, to all of these other, Snapchat, and all of these other, mediums to be able to just get kind of messaging out, little phraseology, little tips on sales, like anything that I can do to potentially help, a person grow their business. Because, what you said earlier really resonates with me, Chris, deeply. Like, what I get out of this, yeah, I mean, I charge a fee, of course, right, for my services. But that's not why I do it. Like, the reason that I do it is because I get so excited. Like, I get so jazzed when I'm having a conversation with a business owner. And after they've been engaged with us for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or whatever that, or a year or years, I've had some business owners that have used our services now for years. And they say, this is in our initial conversation, they're saying something like, this is how we'd like to grow the business and this is where we'd like to go next. And, we're unpacking and uncovering all of that. And then we do it.
Mm.
And then it exceeds their expectation. And then we're growing even more quickly than they thought. And I get goosebumps just talking about it, because that's what I love.
Yeah.
I love growing companies. I love growing like the individuals within those organizations. I love growing the culture. Like, those are the things that really get me going. The money that I get paid is just simply a side dish
Mm-hmm. It allows you to do it more, right?
to
It
the
allows you.
entree, right?
Yeah,
To the
yeah.
entree that I absolutely love. Yeah.
That's amazing. I think you and I are similar in that respect, right? To me, if this show or if other shows that I work on helps to have that person succeed, that's why I do it. I do a show on Amazon called Dealcasters, and we had no idea that it was going to be anything, that it was going to be financially successful, or that we were going to create some sort of influence or impact on what we did and being able to speak at Podfest. But like every time we go live on Amazon, not every time, but when someone says, "Hey, I'm starting my podcast tomorrow," that's why we do it.
Mhm.
We do it because we want people to succeed. We want people to get their voice out there, to do whatever they're going to do. And yes, by the way, you get paid for that. Okay, nice. Don't tell Amazon we might do it for free. But I think that's really what you're talking about. You're like, I'm doing it so that others can succeed. And that kind of plays back to legacy, right? That plays back to what we were talking about before, because when we're done doing this, maybe that impacts something that when we're off this earth, it's there to continue, and hopefully, someone else is paying that forward as well.
That's right. That's right.
We've got a question here from Brittany Kirk on LinkedIn. If my business is just getting started, would either of you recommend doing a podcast, or is it better to be more established first and get more experience in the industry?
Mm, mm. Early and often.
Mm.
I say that to a lot of our clients, and I said, there's no better time to get started than now.
Mm.
And especially from all the things that we talked about earlier in this podcast, Chris. When you're talking about getting your messaging out, getting out there, and just just things that you want to talk about, or what the things that you're going to bring to your potential, to your potential clients. I think you got to get out there and just make it happen. Although in times it seems like I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, I really am not. And Chris, you know this about me, but I would rather go out there and get it done now than to try to figure out, how do I perfect this thing, and how do I make it perfect before we launch. Like, that's not the type of individual that I am. I think that there's T's that need to be crossed and I's that need to be dotted, but it doesn't mean that every single phrase is perfect, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's my take on it. I'd love to hear yours.
Wow. You sure you're not the king? Because everything you just said, man, I'm co-signing. It is. I would just add this. Doing it is getting in your reps. And I think that works for virtually anything that you're wanting to achieve in business, whether it's cold calling or whether it's writing a blog or doing a podcast. You got to start doing it, because your second show is going to be better than your first show. Your third show is going to be better than your second. And you're just going to build those reps, and you're going to get better. I didn't wake up like this with a Shure SM7B microphone. Okay. I go back and I listen to some of my first podcasts, and I cringe, right? And it's like, but then it makes me feel like, okay, I've come this far. And I can, and that was, a year ago or 2 years ago or however long. And look how far I've come. Imagine what I could do if I did it even more for the next 6 months, in the next year. And so that just helps you, from a mindset perspective, build that. I would say this, just to, Brittany, just to kind of build on that, is I have worked with people and they do podcasts, and after a while, you can just tell they're not into it. They're just not having fun. They're not passionate about this. I can tell right away Chris is passionate about this. Crispin, there's two Chris's on the screen. But I would say this. I used to be like, come on, I'd be the coach, no, you got to keep it going. You got to keep going, you got to keep going. And then they do 15 more episodes and they just weren't into it. I would say now, like you're not going to know whether you're into it or not unless you start, like you're saying. So that's absolute. But if it's just not, if you're not into it and you don't have someone that you're working with, whether it's, a podcast producer or an editor or whatever, and it's just becoming too much and you're just not into it and you don't want to do it, don't do it.
Oh, that's great.
I just feel like, there's something else for you. When it comes to a podcast. And so I've kind of changed my, over the past couple of years, I definitely have changed the way I feel about a business starting a podcast. After a while, if you're not into it, no one wants to hear or listen to someone who's not into doing what they're doing.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, I'm going to wind it down now, Chris. Thank you so much. I can't believe the time just flew by, and it's been great having you on today. Thank you.
It has been awesome. Thank you.
I'm going to close with the Sales Arbiter 7. So, this is not an original idea. Our friend James Lipton kind of came up with this. And if you don't know who that is, it's from inside the Actor Studio.
Yeah.
I'm going to close with the Sales Arbiter 7. I've tweaked these just a little bit, but I'd like to get your responses and see what, so maybe the audience, finds out a little bit more about you that maybe they didn't know before.
Okay. I'm in the hot seat.
All right, let's go. So what is your favorite word, Chris?
My favorite word, success. And I think immediately when people would think success, they think financial. And that's not at all how I define it. And the thing I love about success is you can define what that means for you. And I think that's really, we talked earlier about legacy. We talked about, if someone has, wants wealth or whatever, and that's what they consider successful, then that's what's going to motivate them. So I think success is it's a word that can be defined by each individual and how they want to create their own economy.
I love it. I love it. And so on the opposite side of that coin, what is your least favorite word?
Perfect. I think you talked earlier about it, and I'm gonna steal an acronym from Craig Groeschel, who does the Global Leadership Summit and podcast, and the acronym is GETMO, which stands for Good Enough to Move On. And as a recovering perfectionist, that really hit me. And that's why we do this live, is because I'm sure I made mistakes. I'm sure I said, and and all kinds of things but I learned to get better at doing it, and I did it. Yeah. And so when you go up and you speak on a stage as a keynote speaker, you don't put a recording of yourself up there where you've edited out all the ums and the ers. You go up and you speak. And so in order to do that, you've got to get in reps, and you've got to be able to do that. And none of it's perfect, and perfect is boring anyway. So
yeah. Okay, thank you. So next one, what is something that could make your day?
I think earlier we talked about getting prospects or getting clients. And of course, that's always, a great thing to get a new client, right? We got the deal, they signed on the line that's dotted and all that good stuff. But I think mentally, if you can make a friend and look at that as a friend, I think that's really the way I look at it is, it's going to make my day. When we signed Crispin Cruz to Cast Ahead podcasting, that's a wonderful thing. But, if I make a new friend, in the process. I think
Awesome.
that's really what can make your day better.
That's awesome. And on the other side of that coin, right? What's something that could ruin your day, Chris?
Oh God, the power goes out.
The internet goes out.
Yes, that can ruin my day. I mean, I've got 4 shows today. I've got 3 tomorrow. I've got 2 on Wednesday, and I've people on my team are covering those. But man, if the power goes out, that's going to be, that'll ruin some days for sure.
What sound or noise do you love?
My wife laughing. I love the sound of my wife laughing. I have 3 rules every day that I want to do. One is to create more than I consume. The second thing is to listen to music, and the third is to make my wife laugh. That's the reason why she married me was because I made her laugh, not because I look like some knucklehead. It's because I made her laugh.
I love it. I love it. That is one of the best answers I've heard. What's a sound or noise that you hate?
Oh God, there's so many. As a podcast editor, video editor, it's the little click that your mouth makes.
Yeah.
Sibilance, So it's something that it drives me nuts. And luckily, there's a plugin or there's something in podcast editing software. It's called Isotope RX9, and it's called Mouth Declick. And so I can pull that out of all the podcasts, and so all of that, that noise.
Yeah, that one that you're just gonna have to pull out.
Yes, exactly. It'll be muted for the show.
That's beautiful. All right, and the last one: what profession other than your own would you have liked to attempt?
Well, for those of you who are listening and not seeing, there's guitars and bass guitars hanging on my wall. So I am, I guess, a failed musician, but I think a professional musician playing bass, maybe on the road with, I don't know, Iron Maiden.
Awesome.
How's that?
I did not know that about you. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's great. Well, again, thank you for being on. I really appreciate it. To all our guests out there, thank you for watching today, and just glad to have you aboard and listening. Like I've always said, and like I'll continue to say, listen, keep selling and have fun doing it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
This is the reason why you should buy. And we're not asking the most important question, the reason why it was important for them, in their heart of hearts. Like, that's a sale. Then we're going to see results, the mindset. Going into every opportunity, saying to yourself, I would love to have the business, but I don't need the business. When they talk about building their organization just through referral, that means they're missing it. We're selling the experience. We're selling the reason why it's important to your prospect. The internet almost shut down because they're like, are you blind? Do you not know what's going on out there? Do you not see what's happening?
You just did 250,000 cold calls. Congratulations.